some other people. The idea was to see what people feel, both about the conference, about the conferences, and the whole field. It was very easy to analyze, questions that were very clear. There are 47 people answered. You could ask questions why more people didn't answer, and actually, initially, 10 people replied, and it was really due to the two young women who pressed everybody to. They knew how to handle the situation. So these questions are quite easy. How many people? What the imprinted polymer experience? You see, 15 out of the 47 have been working for 0 to 1, 10 2 to 5, 6, and 10 over 20 years of experience in imprinted polymers. Or how many people attended? So you see, it's interesting. The vast majority really are people coming either the first meeting or this is only their second meeting. The goal was, I say, what do people think about the meeting? What do people want? What kind of gripes? What are any unhappiness that people have? Suggestions for improvements? Constructive criticism. Does anybody want to say something?
I say from every point of view, the organization was, the content, the setting, the food, everything. I really think it was perfect. Really enjoyed it tremendously. For me, it's the first time. I haven't been. So I was also very interested to see on all the different aspects of what people are doing and how they're doing. Initially, I thought, maybe there are too many talks. But I guess they were all actually very interesting, and it was important to hear. So, thank you. I want to just thank you so much.
Here are expressions that people made about activities: functional monomer synthesis, molecular modeling. Something in quotation marks. It's a quote from what somebody said. Some of you can identify with it. Commercial applications of MIPs. MIP applications, they're saying the same thing. Rational MIP design. Biomedical applications, sometimes I put in, of this relatively small number of, there were 2 people who asked for that. Biopolymer imprinting. Fundamentals and applications along with cameos from cognate disciplines, methodologies, new applications. Collaboration and commercialization. Somebody said fundamental, not computational studies to understand and improve imprinting results. MIP sensors, commercial applications. Commercial applications is something that sticks out in almost every one of the items here. Very, very popular. I would like to ask if one of you would like to respond. I want to make one comment that I feel, and I've said this to a couple of people, that if the people who are filling this out after the meeting, let's say now, I think they would have a totally different or a significantly different approach. They would have heard Takeuchi, they would have heard you, and Sergei, they would have heard other things that are, there are, I'm sure, many of the people who are coming to the meeting for the first time or the second time may not know that money has been invested in companies that are doing MIP technology, that there are products being sold that are MIPs. So, but I think that they would respond differently.
But coming to this meeting long enough now to see trends and peaks and troughs, and it started out many years ago mainly talking about environmental analysis, solid phase extraction, moving from there into bioanalysis, still solid phase extraction, so very much with a focus upon separation science. And then I think a few years ago the field probably lost a bit of momentum. Lack of interest from external parties, industry, more difficult funding situations for all sorts of reasons, not just related to the technology. But I think within the last 3, 4, 5 years I've seen a bit of a renaissance in the field. And that's in part because I think the community is being a bit bolder and a bit more ambitious about what they want to do. And there's no doubt at all that the average quality of the publications that we're seeing in the field is ramping up quite significantly compared to what we typically saw a few years before. And hopefully that will translate into greater awareness of the methodologies in the scientific community, into the industrial sector as well. The comments that are gathered today are of course helpful, but I think the feedback doesn't stop here, because this will influence not just what happens in 2 years' time, but what will happen in the coming periods as well. The trend in this meeting has certainly been more focused upon biomedical, lots of gel work, and you wouldn't have seen that 20 years ago. Stella Gjerten was one of the rare people talking about gels 20 years ago, and we've come in that area now. So it's a broad field, it's bringing in new people, which is good to see. I think momentum is building again, and I encourage those people to redouble your efforts, keep up the good work, and keep striving to publish the best work that you possibly can in the best possible journals, and don't be satisfied with second best. I think we've got really good stories to tell. At the same time, one thing that was missing from me from this meeting was a good understanding across the board of the fundamentals. I think some of the basics tend to be lost in the excitement of these high-end, state-of-the-art applications. So this is a message really to the younger people in the community. Don't forget about what came before. As I said to one person at this meeting, pull out those papers from Günter Wolf in the 1970s. He was and is a remarkable chemist, has done some outstanding work, and you can learn a lot about the molecular imprinting field and what it takes to get work published in the very highest quality journals by looking at examples from what came before. So I'm quite positive. I've enjoyed the meeting very much. I've heard lots of really spectacular pieces of science, and I encourage you to keep up the good fight, and best of luck for the coming period. We'll maybe come back to the other comments in a second.
The number of new, very promising applications we have heard about here, where you have seen some example where MIPS can really compete with the state-of-the-art and the gold standards that are out there in using biological receptors. At the same time, I mean, we should remember that there have been a number of commercial attempts to commercialize MIPS. I mean, we heard about the solid phase extraction attempts, but then on the other hand, we should be aware that the competing technologies are developing at the same pace or faster. So I mean, you know, mass spectrometry was. So we thought that MIPS could be used routinely and at a broad scale to pick out specific molecules from complex matrices. But now mass spectrometry develops, so you can basically do the same thing with very, very poor sample treatment methods. And so, and Sergei also mentioned, of course, that biological receptors are being developed with a very fast pace. Antibodies, antibody fragments, afterwards we heard about them. So I fully agree with what Sergei said. I mean, the key is to take the opportunity now, and really we have to move aggressively forward. But in order to do that, in order to convince the community, I think we need more really detailed validations, you know, where we compare with the gold standards. We demonstrate clearly that we have something better than the gold standards, and so maybe not me too, but me only. I mean, there should be like unique applications where antibodies are not out there. I mean, and these are the kind of niche applications we need to find, I think, in my opinion. So that's the way to spread the word and get more awareness, and also I think we need to be represented at the larger meetings. I mean, at sections at the ACS meetings. You know, I mean, I think that's the key to move forward.
Both quality and quantity have increased. Everybody's very happy. Limited, but these are not listed in any order, so you have a mix of very serious criticism and people frequently results are not fully validated, et cetera, et cetera. I think, I wonder what the audience would say, or what from your experience, if we, how to address these kinds of points for people who are either entering the field or doing experiments and finding that they try somebody's procedure. I might add that this happens in any field. You know, you get a procedure and you follow it and you find that it doesn't work, and you sometimes contact the person and it turns out that there was a mistake or whatever. But I think this is the fact that this pops up so frequently. I think it's something that should be addressed.
Please consider, maybe this is for organizers of the next meeting of this series, to have 1 or 2 tutorials. So perhaps for newcomers, such a situation that people report imprinting factor less than 1.5. Okay, so maybe if this is just being explained in plain English, what is imprinting and what is not. So maybe that might be helpful. Moreover, several talks were started with introduction, and something basics was explained in expense of results. So perhaps if such tutorials would cover basics, just to explain people, and particularly young people, and particularly newcomers to the field, fundamentals, so that would help towards other presentations. And also, well, something which to most of us seems obvious, that MIPs are not remedies for everything. See, on my place, Institute of Physical Chemistry of the Polish Academy of Sciences, we have an industrial branch producing, manufacturing insect pheromones. Just to fight, to protect gardens and forests, and this is to attract insects of the opposite sex. Okay, so most of these pheromones are just hydrocarbons, either aliphatic or cyclic, slightly branched, but what is common denominator of them? No functional groups, no heteroatoms, and I've been requested to go for sensors for this type of compounds, and I just failed because I couldn't find any way, any approach to imprint such compounds.
I would have been happy if I would have such a meeting before the conference to discuss problems, to discuss the general idea of imprinting, and to get to know what it's about. So that would have helped me a lot. And in addition to this, I want to pick out one of the quotes. I think someone wrote something about functional monomers, and I'm really curious about other functional monomers and who use this functional monomers. And Keneshe, he used positively charged monomers and hydrophobic monomers and could receive nice results without imprinting. So I would wish from other groups that are interested in other functional monomers to see results with this. If they are interested, we can keep in touch. And this to say it a little bit easy. I'm a little bit bored of the normal monomers. So just to see if it can help or it doesn't help. So to see more results with functional monomers.
I just want to address two things and make a little advertisement as well. So in terms of tutorials for newcomers to the field, there have been a number of meetings called Graduate Student Symposia for Molecularly Imprinted Polymers that run on the odd years in between these kind of meetings. We have invited speakers, but they are told, I do not want to hear about your research. I want you to teach all the people in the room about some aspect of molecular imprinting. The other rule for the meeting is that if you attend, you present. So you will generally be asked to speak, which will give you practice of speaking in front of your peers and answering their questions. We have relented in latter years to allowing people to present posters, but only if they're first-year PhD students. If you're in higher years, you will speak. The great thing about the meeting is that we don't charge anything. You just have to get there. Okay? There will be an announcement later this year as to where the 2019 version is held. Last year was in Porto. The year before I hosted it in the south of England. The time before that was in Belfast. Okay? So there will be another meeting. With regards to functional monomers, I completely agree with you. If I see another MAA polymer, I think I will. But there are times when these commercially available monomers are very useful. So everything has to be chosen depending on the application and the target that you actually want to imprint. Okay? So there is a place for the old stuff, but there has to be a place for new things as well, regardless of what Sergey may think.
Well, let Sergey see what
Curious. In the past years, when those conferences started, we had a conference workshop for the students, and it happened several times in Turkish and other places. It was reasonably successful. We had more or less 50 students coming to this workshop. The issue why I think it will be sometimes difficult to run it nowadays, because we're taking our conference to some exotic place like in China and Japan, and travel cost probably will be prohibitive for the students. So it's not necessarily will be a sort of general opportunity to have it every time, but if cost for attendance will be usefully low for the students, then we can always run another workshop for the students. And in my view, it worked in the past, can work again, but it depends on location. If you want to come to learn how to make meat nanoparticles, for example, use them in application, come to us. We can arrange specific targeted training for you. If you have a group of people, we can do it. If you have just individuals, you're most welcome. Just discuss it also with our students, because we have currently, for example, a group of something around of 6 interns from all parts of the world. So we can take more people, and everyone will provide support, basically, and training in using and development in application, whatever.
Sergey's talking about teaching you how to do things. The graduate meeting is like a version of this, but only for students, for you to get to know each other, for you to get to know what each other is doing, for you to be able to ask questions and to answer questions in a more comfortable environment than standing up there and being faced with all of these guys. Yeah. So I think there is space for both of these things. One for learning how to, but the other one for learning how to present in front of an audience that isn't from your institution, and to learn what else is going on in the field through not just reading, but hearing what people have to say about it, what your peers have to say about it. The academics are there only to guide on these occasions.
As you know, crystallographers, they have the depository Cambridge crystallographic databases. So any crystal structure solved is deposited over there. How about, and this is, I'm addressing Mike. So in our community, several people synthesize functional monomers. So why not just once a new monomer is characterized electrochemically, optically, mechanically, whatever. So then go and deposit, and then on your databases, you have databases of monomers for imprinting. And then people could just contact providers or whatever that, okay.
I think I want to see what you want on that site, what fields you want in the database for the monomers. And it will be, of course, open access to everyone. It will be on the MIP database site. I was asked at one point, did I have an index of monomers used in the papers, because I have templates and targets, and the keywords are separate indexes in my site. But because this comes from a reference manager database, actually I don't have any spare fields to add monomers to. I did start trying to do that, but it got very difficult because some monomers were quite complex and some were methyloric acid. But it'll be a new section on the site, and I can set that up. It'll take a little while to do, but it's a very good suggestion, and I'm very happy to do that.
Very important for the community.
Yes, but it needs to be deposited from the people who are actually making the science, with a reference to where they can get the synthesis and characterization. Yeah.
100 years ago, when I was doing organic chemistry, they, you get a procedure that was repeated by someone. So it might be also useful, somebody who has a procedure, and then somebody who uses it can reply and say, yes, this worked perfectly well, or better, it works much better if you use a different solvent.
Yeah, that can be, you can be commented on that. But this brings back to things like organic synthesis, which is a collection of verified procedures. So they've been submitted by someone, and then another laboratory has checked it and verified the results.
Does that still exist?
It still exists, as far as I know. It's actually free online as well. I don't know how we could do that unless people do that voluntarily, because it's a big cost involved in going to repeat some work and not necessarily having the right equipment and sourcing that and the right materials. So, it's a great idea, but it would have to be people volunteering to do that in their own laboratories.
I'd also like to address, again, back to the point of practical applications. If anybody would share with us things that they're involved in that involves company or very practical, something that's going close, and I've drafted Kirsten to say something.
We have lately been approached by this a very special one, actually. First, it's big and very famous, and second, they are also very special how they treat with their academic collaborators. So we had this project with L'Oréal that was started a few years ago, and they originally asked me to come for a seminar to think about possible things that can be done with implanted polymers. So we came up with quite a few different projects, but it turned out they had already in mind certain things. So we identified 4 projects. None of them I thought would ever succeed, but since we needed money, we said yes, and started all of them. 2 of them died immediately because L'Oréal lost interest, and the two other ones continued for a while. So that stopped after about a year, also because for some reason suddenly they lost interest. And what continued until some degree of success was the deodorant project. So I have to say, we had 2 years of funding, about 200,000 euros from L'Oréal. And at the end, we really saw the light at the end of the tunnel, but then they didn't want to continue another year, so we continued on our own. And actually the publication that came out of it in Angewandte, that was most of the results we actually obtained afterwards. And then we didn't hear for a while, and I thought, okay, they probably put it in some drawer and it was finished. And so I tried to make a little bit of publicity. For example, the CNRS, they have a mailing list where they send these kind of things to journalists. So I gave them a little abstract, and they sent out to 900 journalists in all kinds of countries and places, and that actually set off quite some interest, and started with Chemistry World, the Scientific American, and kind of it was kind of auto-accelerated itself, and that ended up even in TV emissions in France, in newspaper, and in the radio in the morning. So we didn't know, we just replied to their questions, and they made emissions. And then the big boss of the head of R&D in L'Oréal actually heard about it, and he shouted at those people. He didn't know that this project existed, so he shouted at the people from that department that we were working with, and that's how it started about a year later again. And then suddenly everything was super urgent, and like really you couldn't even wait from the morning to noon with your answer. He would call you 3 times, I guess, because he was at the edge of losing his job, I don't know. It felt like that. And then they ordered for us a big quantity of material, about 100 gram, which was quite a challenge. And the money that I asked for that was much too little. I thought it was a lot, but it turned out because for some reason we agreed to some characterization, and then they tried to put all kinds of things. And since we made 50 batches, so we had to do the characterization 50 times. So it was, and now this material is in the hand of L'Oréal, and they are evaluating it now in-house. And the problem with that is they have their procedures that they will not change. And I feel that none of these procedures is actually adapted to MIPS. But they said, this doesn't matter, we are going to do like that. For example, you incubate the polymer with the molecules, and then you hydrolyze everything, and you look if the molecules are still there. Okay, if you hydrolyze everything before removing the polymer, of course the molecule is still there. But that is the procedure, and this kind of thing we are struggling with. And always, no, it doesn't work. Yes, it works, but you didn't do it right. And they will not listen. And we are now there, and I mean, the good thing is they have facilities to use real sweat, real people. They don't take shower for 2 weeks. They have in-house saunas and all kinds of these things that we, of course, could never do. So, for the moment, that's where we are. We are hoping to continue with either a different project or the same or something. The only thing that I really don't want to do is a scale up, because that was quite a tough experience.
What I will do in the near future, I will write to all of you with a simple request to send me, if there is this information, non-confidential of course, about commercial contacts you had, and also information about if there is any company you're familiar with which might be interested in MIPS and also in attending MIP conference. So we see whether we can actually bring here not just academics, but also some representative from industry for the next meeting when we're going to have it in whatever location people will choose.
There needs to be reasonable expectation on both sides in those arrangements, and undoubtedly the field of imprinting, and indeed other fields, catalytic antibodies springs to mind. The field in the past has been over-egged, people have over-promised, and industrialists got quite turned off by materials that were not delivering. So please do go out and strike those agreements and generate those new projects and applications, but don't offer the earth, because MIPS can't do everything.
We are looking here mostly on application of MIPS for sensing. The field of sensors is very tough. It's actually overdone. And not only that, but if you think about that, and if you take even examples where a sensor was successful, so there are a few criteria for that. Take, for example, the sensor for glucose. There was a real need, a very wide market, and there was no other way to sense glucose but to do it electrochemically. And the investment there over the years was a few billions of dollars before a real sensor came out. On the other hand, sometimes the field of, or the market of sensor is actually controlled by regulation. So if there is, the governments can regulate, can decide that we need to sense or to determine something. So this is also a driving force for sensing. But in most cases, also in many cases that have been shown here, it will never reach the market, one, because the demand is not big enough. The market is not big enough for a company really to invest for many years on such sensors. Even if you think that it would be very nice to have a sensor for a biomarker, but again, the field is not enough. So what, I mean, the take-home lesson is that I think that we should also think about other applications than in the sensoring field. You could see a nice variation like Nomi showed, where the MIPs were used in order to drive the crystallization. So I'm not saying that this will become an application, but I think that we should try to use also MIPs in terms of applications for other fields other than sensing, and don't expect that every sensor in the lab will become an application. Usually that's not the case. One out of maybe 1,000 will reach the market because of many reasons, and not necessarily due to scientific reasons.
We have to look for a market where biomolecules doesn't work, where we really can expand our applications, because the matrix is very complex and we have to use organic solvents, which is an advantage when we are using MIPS, for instance, and biomolecules in that media are not going to work properly. And in some cases, I'm thinking about some applications where really it's hard, when you have toxins, when you cannot produce antibodies. So I think that I fully agree with him, we have an area where we can expand and we can really be competitive, because the biomolecules which are already in the market are not working properly. And it doesn't matter if it is sensors or affinity separation, so it's a broad area.
But he has said, I think you also mentioned that the quality is increasing, but so many people either have the impression, or from their own experience of publications not being up to snuff, that is very, very bad for the whole field and for all of us working in this area. One of the questions is whether this idea of maybe a differently designed, but questionnaires of this sort should be part of our meetings.
After you filled in all your personal stuff, and the last page could be some questions, so you're kind of forced to answer, and so we can get the information.
How does the audience respond to that? Good idea? Bad idea? Oh, you're alone.
I think Danny's made a very good point there, that the questionnaire is anonymous, whereas your registration is not.
That's important. Yes, that's correct.
To return to the topic of quality of publication as well as the education of MIP, because I'm a couple of years ago, I'm a new face in this area. I have to learn a lot of standards and conventional practice. However, I found it very unfortunate to find some people did not fully understand what imprinting effect is, and they can publish a paper in very high impact journal, impact factor more than 6. However, the imprinting factor sometimes is 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. So what does that mean? In my own opinion, more or less is garbage, frankly to say. Maybe 20 years ago, maybe many years ago, it's acceptable. However, we have to know the standard for what we are doing. So I do believe it's our responsibility to educate our young generation, to educate our students, or as well as general public, to understand what molecular imprinting is, how to validate a good MIP is. So it's a good idea to open short course just before or after the conference, maybe start from next MIP conference. As far as I know, many media conference like HPLC or PDCon conference, they provide a lot of short course. So probably it's a good idea to someone else come up to teach some aspects. For example, how to do characterization of the bounding property, how to validate for bio-staff application, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that's my response.
Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you to each one of you who came here, was brave enough to take the flight to Israel and come. And I hope that you were not disappointed. We tried to do our best to make it scientifically good, and that's your part, basically. And I think that in this respect, I think that there is a general agreement here that actually the lectures as well as the posters were of very high quality. And I was really surprised, and I was very glad to see that. And we heard that. I think that a few tips that we should take over should be a very good combination between young and old people in the field. Okay, or let's say mature people in the field. I think that we should hear more the young people. We should hear them not only when lecturing, not only next to the posters, but they should be encouraged to ask questions and to be involved in the discussions. The discussions, you could see, were very intense, were very good, and I was very glad. And that's the best indication of a good scientific conference. And I was, again, glad about that. We tried our best to add also a social part, and I think that's very important. Normally, that's what you remember from the conference. I do think that this is important, should be taken into account, and should be done in a sensitive way, and somehow throughout the whole week. And I felt that I think this part was okay here. And last, maybe pay attention to the very small things. Okay, treat everybody individually if you can, and I hope that you were satisfied with that. Immediately after, from here to maybe to your hotel, you can stay with short sleeves, okay? Don't bring umbrellas, and so on. And enjoy the nice evening and maybe the weekend. If you need some, any advice where to go and so on, please feel free to contact me. And I wish you a nice and safe trip back home, and see you next time. Thank you. And one last thing was, we had a discussion about whether to have a proceeding of this conference. And that's always problematic, okay? I'm not going to describe all the problems, but we came with an idea to try to make a proceeding in which we will ask you to write, those of you who are willing to do that, mini reviews on your individual subjects. And then we might, first of all, get more positive response from you, and the impact of such spatial issue, which will contain short mini reviews of different fields, might be very useful also to attract young people to the field, okay? So you will get also a message from me about that, and we might end eventually with a very nice, not only memory, but something which will be very useful in terms of education, scientific, and so on. Okay, so have this in mind, and thank you.
I will buy my hotel. Next time I will be in the new world.